This is a Fox News alert. President Trump has unveiled his strategy for national security, one that enshrines his America First campaign approach into U.S. policy. In an address at the Ronald Reagan Building in Washington, the president outlined a plan that includes defeating ISIS, protecting the U.S. from North Korea, and securing our borders, among other topics. The president also spoke about leaving a greater America to our children and our grandchildren. Watch.
On top of everything else, our leaders drifted from American principles. They lost sight of America's destiny, and they lost their belief in American greatness. On January 20th, 2017, I stood on the steps of the Capitol to herald the day the people became the rulers of their nation again. American success is not a foregone conclusion. It must be earned, and it must be won. Together, we will leave our children and our grandchildren a nation that is stronger, better, freer, prouder, and yes, an America that is greater than ever before.
Okay, Greg, I know what you're going to say, so I can't call on you right now. Dana?
Well, a national security strategy is something that is congressionally mandated, but presidents can wait a couple, 3 years even before they do something. And I think that any president that puts out a plan, like that's the plan until breaking news changes everything,
right.
Which is, you never know what's going to pop up in the world, and every problem in the world ends up on the president's desk. There's two things that I really liked about it, and in particular, you're going to see a push about this next year, and we need to talk about it more, which is military readiness. And the state of our military, the repairs that are needed for our planes, the new planes that are needed, the new equipment, and also all of the cybersecurity issues that we're dealing with. The president touched on that a little bit, and I think you'll see a push in the new year, especially when it comes to funding. The other thing that I liked hearing him say was that as a force for good throughout its history, America will use its influence to advance our interests and benefit humanity. And I think that really does keep us separate from other countries in the world, that we are exceptional for a reason, and that really is the main reason.
All right, so you liked it. I mean, definitely themes you thought about American exceptionalism.
I mean, I thought of it made sense to me, like protecting the homeland.
Sure.
I get it. American prosperity. If America is doing better economically, that means that you have more money in the world and more influence, and more money to pay for military readiness in order to protect the country. And also the economic freedom is a part of that. Preserve peace through strength and advance American influence. I mean, if you were just reading it that way, you could say any president of the past 200 years could have had similar things.
Sounds like Reagan a bit, though.
When he talks about it you heard like sort of the first half of the speech was really going through the list of accomplishments that he thinks he's had over this past year, and then he got to the strategy. So it all fitted together at the end. But for me, the two things that stood out the most was military readiness, which we know we have a huge problem with, and that has to get fixed. And the second piece being this saying that we will continue to be a force for good in the world, which the world needs.
Which most definitely. Okay, Greg, you heard some different things as well in there.
No, I heard kind of the same things. I mean, I guess I'm always tired of hearing it's always about the children.
Right.
But I'm okay with that. This is the central piece of his agenda. I called it the stool of security. So it's a table with three legs. One of them is national security, dealing with our enemies and adversaries like ISIS and North Korea. Then you have domestic security, which is basically reinvigorating the way the country feels and appreciates law enforcement, because we saw them disrespected for so long. And then the third is the border, which is linked to the above. The border becomes more valuable in terms of national security when you have terrorism and you have technology. So that's an important thing. Those are the three legs on this stool. But the big point here is, somewhere along the line, as government grew, we lost the plot. What is government for, primarily? This. Without this stool of security, you don't have freedom or prosperity. Security and strength guarantees freedom and prosperity. Then the last thing politically is that if you don't like Trump or like you just couldn't get in, you just couldn't accept him. This is the kind of agenda that makes you overlook the small stuff that bugs you. You know what I mean? I've said this before. If somebody is right on the big picture, you can forgive or overlook the smaller, more embarrassing Polaroids. So what if he tweets and there's always this kind of underlying chaos and conflict? If somebody is right on the big picture, it doesn't matter. And when we look back, we will realize that it didn't matter. No one will remember a lot of this stuff, but we will remember the strong military and enhanced security and no terrorism.
All right, well, great points, because immigration and border protection are also key components of President Trump's new national security strategy. Watch this.
Leaders in Washington imposed on the country an immigration policy that Americans never voted for, never asked for, and never approved. A policy where the wrong people are allowed into our country and the right people are rejected. American citizens, as usual, have been left to bear the cost and to pick up the tab. A nation without borders is not a nation.
Okay, Jesse, a reaction to this.
I think he was trying to strike a very clean break from past administrations by saying he's here to ignite a reawakening in American confidence and usher in a rebirth of pride and patriotism and prosperity by putting America first and putting the people above the powerful. And American greatness has to be guarded vigilantly because our destiny is not assured. And he tried to inspire all the American people to be competitive in a new competitive world, and pointed out China and Russia as other great nations that are trying to seize what we have. And then he pointed to all the litany of failures from past administrations. Taxpayers bailing out other alliances, jobs being fleeced by overseas out of countries, spending a lot of blood and treasure on wars where we tie. And he went along that list, but then, like Greg said, pointed out to the 4 pillars. Protect the homeland. And you just heard him. Border security, and that's the wall. That's reinforcing our great Border Patrol agents, and that's getting rid of things like chain migration and the visa lottery. Also defeating ISIS and make sure they can't come over here, but then promoting peace and prosperity, and that's through cutting taxes and cutting regulation and not signing bad trade deals where workers get hosed and big companies make out great. And then preserving peace through strength, talking about a huge reinvestment in our military, but also focusing on modern threats like missile defense and cyber. And then at the end, he kind of tweaked President Obama. He's trying to focus on realism, not idealism, where we're not going to try to impose our way of life on other people, and we're not going to lead from behind. Instead, we're going to champion our values. And I think he believes that that's the best opportunity for us to maintain our #1 posture.
You love being #1, Jesse. Okay, so Juan, did you hear this through the same prism that Jesse did?
Not at all.
Right.
I mean, I certainly agree with Jesse that he was playing against, grievance politics, going at all the presidents who came before, when in fact this, I think somebody else on the panel, maybe you, Dana, said it could have been any other president. This is basically in keeping with our national security framework.
Yeah, she said
that. But where it differs, and to me, he identified it, so you got to give him credit for that, is that China and Russia are exerting increasing evidence that they want to increase their profile in the world, globally. So to me, if you look at Asia, where we backed out of the Asian trade deal, I see China stepping up, and it's not only stepping up in terms of economics, but militarily. Similarly, Russia in the Middle East, given what happened in Syria, but also with Iran, you see Russia playing a bigger role. So Trump identifies that, but he then doesn't say exactly how we will respond. To the contrary, he says, we're going to be more focused on our interest and our security, etc. Well, of course, he's going to focus on our security, but I don't see that we are taking the necessary steps to fight back against Russia and China's growing influence in the world. I was out at that Reagan Library the other day for the National Defense Forum, and this is what the defense experts are saying, is that, there's a lot of talk from Trump, a lot of rhetoric, but no action in terms of saying, here's what our Middle East policy was going to be.
But he is reprioritizing. The #1 threat isn't Russia. The #1 threat isn't China. It's existential terror. That's the ball that he sees. These other things are behind that ball, and he will deal with them. And maybe they can help. Maybe Russia can help with terror. That's what he's looking. When you look at that, when you look at it from that angle, that's what happens.
I don't agree with you. And by the way, there was an interesting phone call over the weekend between Trump and Putin, where Putin thanks apparently Trump for intelligence that thwarted an attack that would have taken place in St. Petersburg. But I don't think that terror is the #1 issue here. if you're talking about our national security structure,
right.
I think you are talking about the possibility that terror would be generated in a place like the Middle East,
and let's listen
especially after what he did with Jerusalem.
Well, President Trump also addressed a major strategic goal of the U.S., which was destroying ISIS.
What he did.
We have dealt ISIS one devastating defeat after another. The coalition to defeat ISIS has now recaptured almost 100% of the land once held by these terrorists in Iraq and in Syria. Great job. We're now chasing them wherever they flee, and we will not let them into the United States.
Okay, so focus there on national security, obviously on borders, a strong immigration policy, peace through strength. Dana, I echo some of the comments you made earlier about former presidents, past presidents, really focusing on this kind of Reagan-esque theme, and then here using a specific example, topic sentence, ISIS.
Right. Well, I do think that the technology has advanced so much in 16 years, and one of the things that you can do is shrink ISIS's territory.
Okay.
You can even prevent them from getting in here, but we have shown, just in the last month, that we continue to have a problem with online radicalization. So ISIS is able still to put videos up online to try to figure out a way to get to people, and the president is saying, okay, well, the first thing we have to do as a part of America First is figure out a way to use the tools that we have in order to prevent that from happening. He doesn't spell it all out in here, and you can't in a national security document. A lot of this stuff has to be classified. But I do think that he will have to have quite a strong push, and probably you'll see it in the State of the Union, that military readiness, which includes dealing with possibilities of biological terror, online terror attacks, like cyber attacks. And then you had somebody like China, just to pull this all together, as what Juan was talking about. This morning, China released a huge plan for its government to be the #1 artificial intelligence creator and technology developer in the world.
So they've been listening.
So they're like way ahead in terms of that type of planning, and we don't want to be playing second fiddle to that. So there's a lot that's going to happen, and I think this next year is how you set the stage for how are you going to provide the resources to our military and intelligence forces in order to do that.
Military readiness, and technology.
Those resources, $700 billion investment.
Wow.
That's a historic investment in the U.S. military. And to Juan's point, I mean, he's ripped up the rules of engagement, which allowed us to destroy the caliphate over there. No artificial timelines in Afghanistan. The Iran Revolutionary Guard is now labeled as a terrorist organization. That bad deal is also in the crosshairs. And the North Korea situation, major sanctions slapped on them. So to say that the president isn't really doing anything or hasn't really spelled out how he's doing it, one, you want to remain unpredictable, but two, I think there's a lot of leather out there.
You know, I watched, I can't remember what Sunday show yesterday. It was pretty funny. They were interviewing some dude, some expert, and he was talking about, beginning about how Trump had a bad year. Trump had a bad year, except for ISIS. Except for ISIS, economy's doing pretty good, and he may get a tax on the judges. But he had a really bad year. And then another guy says, yeah, except for ISIS. It's like, if all he did was ISIS, that's a pretty damn great year.
Yeah.
And by the way, you know, I mean, we had other news today about, and I don't know how true it is, but you know, what a difference from Obama, who gave a pass to Hezbollah. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's something that maybe we should look into.
I think you guys should pick up a copy of a newspaper, and in it would say, oh my gosh, look, President Bush, President Obama, all of these people were fighting terror all along.
Badly from President Obama's
I think Obama was colluding with Hezbollah and Iran in order to save that deal.
Oh my God.
That's so offensive.
That's what Politico said in that newspaper you said I had to read.
That's what you say. I mean, and that's just, you know, more
I know
Trump
it was a long
rhetoric.
See what happened?
Empty. Go ahead.
Was it in Politico?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So it wasn't crazy.
It was crazy.
No.
But you like Politico.
And Brett Baer is going to have a big thing on it tonight, that very story.
So there you go. That's
Long tease.
That's deep tease.